resign as chairman of the Home Affairs Select Committee. He has issued a statement, which I think you will all have had, and he is writing to the Speaker of the House of Commons to signal his resignation, and in due course an election will be held for a new Labour member to take over as chairman of the Home Affairs Select Committee. In the interim, the committee have nominated me to be the acting chair for the next few weeks until that election takes place. Now, the committee listened, I think in sadness, to what Keith had to say, and with a good deal of respect. Keith has clearly acted in the best interests of the Home Affairs Select Committee and the important work that we do. And with sadness, we all accepted that that was the appropriate course of action that he has taken, and we also appreciate the many challenges facing him personally and his family. Notwithstanding the nature of the press stories, all members of the Home Affairs Select Committee across all the parties paid very fulsome tributes to the work that Keith has done. It is remarkable that he's been chairman of the Select Committee for 9 years, the longest serving Select Committee chair. In that time, he has overseen the publication of 120 reports, and I think he has a reputation for getting the best out of witnesses, for being a robust chair, but also being a fair chair as well. And again, I don't think it's an underestimate to say that the work of the committee under his chairmanship has had a direct and big impact on government policy, on law, and also on public opinion at times as well. So it is with sadness that we have lost Keith Vaz as the chairman, but the most important thing is the work that the Home Affairs Select Committee does across all the parties represented on that committee. We are determined to carry on with business as usual. We have important work to do. Straight after this, we will be having a session with the new Immigration Minister, Robert Goodwill, and tomorrow we will be interviewing the new Home Secretary as well. I will be chairing those meetings, and business will carry on as usual until a new chair is elected, probably in October. So thank you for your understanding. I hope now probably you will give us a little more breathing space, the members of the Home Affairs Select Committee who've had to turn off their mobile phones over the last 48 hours, and I hope that statement goes some way into explaining exactly what has happened and why it has happened and what will now happen going forward.
How was Mr Vaz?
Keith Vaz, as I said, was exceedingly frank and open with the committee, as he has always been in all his time that I've been on the committee, and I'm the longest serving Conservative member. He was genuinely sad about what has happened. He apologised to the committee for the trouble this has caused, and he obviously acknowledges that, and these are private matters now he will have to deal with. But absolutely, what was paramount to him, characteristically, is the reputation and the work of the committee going forward.
I wonder if I could address a question to Mr Vaz standing beside you. Now that the chairmanship, which will be a Labour chairmanship, is coming up, would you be interested in standing for it?
I don't think now is the appropriate time to start talking about who is going to become the new chair of the Select Committee, given the current one is still in place till his resignation is effective. And after all that we've heard and seen over the last 48 hours, I think it'd be a bit premature to start declaring what one is going to or not going to do.
Can you explain a little more about the process, what happens now in terms of
Okay, what happens now is Keith is writing to the Speaker today to announce that he is resigning as chairman of the Home Affairs Select Committee. At some stage, we think next week, the Speaker will be announcing the procedure for the election of the outstanding chairmanships of the Select Committees, including the two new Select Committees. So in order to cause as little upheaval as possible, Keith has requested that the election of a new Home Affairs Committee chair should be done simultaneously with that. And so it's likely when the House returns fully after the conference recess in October then those positions will be advertised. It will be up to, in the case of the Labour Home Affairs Select Committee, Labour MPs to be nominated, and the vote of all members of Parliament will take place in the normal way. So a new chair is likely to be in place at some stage in October, if that timetable is confirmed by the Speaker, probably next week.
Mr Acting Chairman, do you think any of the committee's work, either on prostitution or on drugs, has been undermined in any way by the allegations which now surround the former chairman, Keith Vaz?
No, I think the work that we've already undertaken, the report that we undertook earlier in the year, at the instigation of another member of the committee, not of the chair, in fact, to do with prostitution, the integrity of that has not altered at all. There is further work to be done on that particular subject as well as other subjects, and they will be carried on by the new committee and by the new chair when he or she is elected.
Do you think he was right to resign, given circumstances?
Well, Keith made it absolutely clear that the paramount consideration for him, and it's not surprising he should take this view, having overseen that Home Affairs Select Committee for so many years, should be what is in the best interests of the Select Committee. Because of the media attention that he has inevitably attracted, clearly that could be ongoing, and that could undermine the very important work and very important studies that we need to carry out. And on that basis, he has taken that decision, and the committee agreed with him that that was the right course of action for him to take with regret. He will no longer be on the committee when his resignation becomes intact, but he signalled he has no intention to take any further part in the work of the committee before a new, or at all, and the new chairman will then take over.
You might explain why rather than acting chair is the opposition, senior opposition.
I don't think we need to go into that. Everybody okay with that? We've now got to go back and get on with business as usual. Thank you very much, everybody.
OK, well, Tim Lawson there stepping into the breach. He will be the acting chair for the next few weeks as Keith Vaz has resigned. Sky's Tom Parmenter, I think, is standing by for us in Westminster. And Tom, we heard there Tim Lawson saying that all members of the committee paid full tributes to Keith Vaz.
Yeah, lots of tributes to Keith Vaz's professional work as the chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee, a position he's held for 9 years. And as part of that committee, they scrutinise policy on a number of issues that are perhaps pertinent to the revelations that we've seen, first of all, in the Sunday morning newspapers on Sunday, but also, of course, the many questions that have followed as well. Scrutiny around prostitution law, scrutiny around drugs laws in the UK. Of course, it was just too big a conflict of interest for him to continue in that role. It was widely anticipated that if he hadn't have stepped aside, then members of the committee would have perhaps looked to go through a no confidence motion, but that hasn't been necessary. He has stepped aside today, acknowledging the distraction that the revelations in the newspaper has caused, and of course continue to cause. It just wasn't feasible for him to continue in that role, and there are of course many further questions that are still unanswered. He hasn't yet addressed the scandal itself. He clearly spoke quite explicitly to those members of Parliament that we were hearing from there in one of the private meetings a short time ago. He was very frank, they said, in his discussions about what he's been through and the impact on his family, but he still hasn't discussed or addressed many of the questions that are still arising from this scandal. The only words that he's given us this afternoon, he said to our senior political correspondent Robert Nisbet over in Portcullis House there, "Why would I talk to you all on camera when you say such nice things about me?" A healthy dose of sarcasm there from Keith Vaz, but he still hasn't really addressed many of the issues that still will dog him for the coming days. The issues of whether or not he can be still an MP, and also on the National Executive Committee of the Labour Party.
OK, Tom, thank you. Well, let's return to Portcullis House in Westminster and our senior political correspondent there, Robert Nisbet. Just referenced there by Tom, you managed to grab a quick word with him.
That's right. I walked down the corridor with him just as he was about to go into that conversation with the senior members of the committee. And I said, would he be prepared to come and talk to us afterwards? And he said, why would I want to speak to you when you say such nice things about me? He was perfectly friendly and even at one point put his arms around my shoulder as we were walking down the corridor, seemed to be very relaxed with his interactions, not only with other journalists who were also interested in talking to him, but also other committee members. He didn't look like a man who had the attention of the national media on his doorstep, both at home and at work, and had just in effect given up the post that had come to define his Westminster career. I think what is also interesting, Anna, talking to members of the committee, is just the high regard that they hold him in terms of the work he has done on the committee. The word that I have heard repeatedly said today is tenacious. The tenacity that he had when asking questions of witnesses who were coming to give evidence to the committee, that he very rarely let people off with pat answers and pursued them. He also, according to Nusgani, the Labour committee member, the MP, who we spoke to a little bit earlier on, broadened the remit of the committee as well. And she said that without him, it's unlikely that the committee would have gone into areas such as female genital mutilation. And she said that will be his legacy as chairman of the committee. But of course, now he is gone, and now we understand from Tim Lawton, the acting chairman of the committee, that he will leave the committee, not just the chair, but leave the committee entirely. And now I suppose a question mark rests over his career as an MP. We were talking a little earlier on to Andrew Bridgen, the Conservative MP, who's been something of a thorn in the side of Mr Vaz. He's also in the neighbouring constituency in Leicestershire, and he said he intends to pursue his campaign against Mr Vaz. He doesn't believe that he should be an MP, let alone chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee.
Okay.
For good, do you think his position is tenable?
I was waiting for you to jump on me then.
No, I know you're going to say it, so I'll let you roll on and then I'll chime in.
I think he needs to resign.
From the Home Affairs Select Committee or as an MP?
From the Home Affairs Select Committee. I think that committee is put in place, not just, but one of the reasons, one of the subjects they look after is prostitution, drugs, all that kind of thing. I think when you've got somebody who's dabbling in that kind of world, I just don't think they are the most effective person to lead those investigations into those subjects, for making recommendations, etc. I'm not saying that people can't have a private life, that would be a bizarre thing to say, but I think when you hold that level and position of authority, and I think you're involved in those things, I think you're not the right man for the job. I want them to have integrity. I don't want to think, oh, are you kind of pushing this in this direction because actually it's helping you. Yeah, it's helping you. I don't want to be. I don't want to have that conflict of interest.
And for you, Kevin, what happens in his private life is his own business, and it shouldn't affect him as an MP.
I think as with anything, if you're completely innocent, I've never met a saint ever. And if you're completely innocent, then you should be running for government.
What if he's bringing the House of Commons into disrepute? We heard from Theresa May yesterday saying that she wanted the MPs to be people that you can have confidence in. Do you think that people can have confidence in Keith Vaz?
I think you can have confidence in Keith Vaz until you find out what he does in his bedroom. And that can be said of anyone in any walk of life. I can have confidence in any of you until I find out what practices you have in your bedroom. Do I really want to know that when I'm watching Sky News? No, I do not.
That's a bit different. What I do or don't do in my bedroom is kind of irrelevant because I'm not here, you know, regulating and providing recommendations on subjects such as prostitution.
But you're here giving your opinion. So yes, you're giving your opinion on someone else's private life. So then...
I'm not hired. I'm not a public servant hired to review and run a committee that looks at practices...
Takes evidence from experts.
Or even grill, you know, he's going to be grilling chief constables, isn't he? I mean, are we going to be sitting there watching, thinking, well, you know, the cat's out of the bag now, isn't it? It's too late.
I think I'm slightly playing devil's advocate here by actually saying what I'm saying, but my point is that no one is whiter than white. Do I agree with what Keith Vaz has done? No, I do not. Do I believe he's a saint? No. Do I believe any of us are saints? No, I do not. Make sure your hands are clean before you start.
It does affect people's credibility, doesn't it? Whether you think it's fair or not fair.
And the question is
human nature
whether or not he will you know, take heed of the public opinion at the moment? Because yesterday he arrived in the House of Commons and he didn't seem bothered.
He's a headstrong, brazen man. I'm not really a Keith Vaz fan, but what I'm saying is a lot of the time when it comes to people's private lives, we tend to judge. We really do judge. And I'm telling you, none of us are whiter than white.
Kevin Adams, Michelle Dewberry, always good to hear from you both. Thanks very much indeed.
Between the Home Affairs Select Committee and Mr Vaz, he's going to give his side of the story, and then what?
Well, I think Mr Vaz is going to face enormous pressure to step down. He'll give his defence, if you like. He will argue that he hasn't broken any laws. What he does in his private life is entirely up to him. And he'll also be critical of newspaper for paying the prostitutes for this story. But he will face demands to go. And if he doesn't go, I'm told he'll be given 24 hours to reflect on his position. The committee will then reconvene, and the expectation is they may then try and hold a vote of no confidence in his position. Now, we're in uncharted territories. No one's ever done this before, hold a vote of no confidence in a committee chairman. They're not even sure whether it would make any difference, whether it would have any authority, whether you can oust a committee chairman. But significantly, I think the mood is now hardening against him. I was speaking to one Labour figure on the committee who said to me that Labour members are not inclined to support him. Now, that would seem to me to suggest he is going to have an awfully difficult job to hang on to his position. I expect what he'll do today is say, look, I'm prepared to stand aside temporarily. That, however, I suspect will not be enough for members of the committee, and I expect he will either recognise that and stand down, or will be forced to stand down tomorrow.
OK, thank you very much, Norman Smith. Well, let's talk to former Labour MP and London Mayor Ken Livingstone, who joins us outside his home in North West London. So Labour members of the Home Affairs Select Committee, and Norman Smith says, are not inclined to support Keith Vaz. Do you?
Well, I think someone's private life should be private. I remember 35 years ago, in the run-up to the GLC election, reporters came to me with evidence that the Tory leader, my opponent, was having an affair. They got pictures of women going in and out of the flat he was renting and so on. And I said, I'm not running with that. We're running on the issue of cutting fares, and I'm not going to use those sort of personal smears. And I regret that here in the Sunday Mirror, they decided that this is more important than the serious issues such as the economy.
He's the chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee, which conducts inquiries into drugs and prostitution. He's alleged to have offered to fund the buying of cocaine. He's alleged to have used male prostitutes. Don't you think that's a conflict of interest?
Well, I mean, let's see what if it turns out to be true. I mean, I could spend the next half hour recounting to you all the stories you've seen about me in the press which turned out not to be true. And I think what I find particularly ridiculous about this is I can recall being at Labour Party conferences and watching journalists there going up to their hotel room with prostitutes they picked up from the streets. I mean, all across our society, the people that pay for sex. I don't approve of that. I don't do it myself.
If it's true,
but I don't think it's illegal.
If it's true, would you accept that that is a conflict of interest with his position as chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee?
No, I don't think the fact that if it turns out to be true and he has paid for sex, that prevents him from actually conducting the inquiry into prostitution and the problems of prostitution. The problems of prostitution are what happens to the poor prostitutes, not so much their clients.
Aren't you concerned that a Labour colleague of yours is allegedly exploiting young immigrant men for sex?
I mean, let's see what turns out to be true about all of this. I've known Keith Vaz, I mean, must be 40 years. And he's been a good campaigner on a whole range of issues about social justice. And in all that time, I mean, I never recalled him talking about sex or anything like that, or drugs. He was always focused on what he could do to actually make life better for his constituents or the wider community.
If it's true, surely that would alarm you, that he was exploiting such young men, potentially vulnerable young men, for sex.
Well, let's see how vulnerable they are. I mean, the reality is, though, do you judge someone's political career on the basis of one incident like this, or the total work of over 4 decades? And everybody makes mistakes. I mean,
well,
how many
some newspapers
in Britain
today
have had an affair?
Yeah, some newspapers today are reporting that he's visited male prostitutes before.
I mean, let's see what turns out to be true. The simple fact is, don't judge somebody on one mistake they make in their life, or even a couple of mistakes. I mean, it's the total that he's done for other people, right the way in his own constituency and up and down Britain. He's always been on the side of justice, and that can't just all be swept away by one mistake that he's made.
A select committee that follows newspaper claims into allegations that he paid for the services of 2 male sex workers. Mr Vaz was due to meet other members of the committee this afternoon. Our chief political correspondent Vicky Young has spoken to member Nusrat Ghani to get her reaction.
Just give me your reaction. You're a member of the Select Committee. What's your reaction to Keith Vaz's decision to resign?
I think it's an absolutely right decision to make. The work of the committee has to continue without any distractions, and I think that is what the language that Keith himself used. And it's an incredibly important committee with a huge amount of credibility. Not only do we scrutinise government, but we undertake inquiries into new and very important issues. And you know, since I've been an MP, I'm a new member of Parliament, we've undertaken inquiries into female genital mutilation, the rise of anti-Semitism, which we're discussing this afternoon, but including extremism and radicalisation. And this has all happened because Keith has and was chair, so we need to continue work on the committee without any other distractions, so Keith has done the right thing.
He said before that he is entitled to a private life, that he's done nothing wrong, but do you think that he was compromised?
He is entitled to a private life, but I think he also mentioned in his statement that when you're holding other people to account, you have to be accountable yourself. For me, the most important thing is the credibility of the committee. We do a huge amount of work that we want to be taken seriously, not only within Westminster, but outside, and we didn't want any distractions from the inquiries that we're undertaking. And this afternoon we will crack on with the important inquiries, also taking evidence from the new Immigration Minister as well.
And would you have asked him to stand down if you'd met him this afternoon? He hadn't already said he was going to go?
We were due to meet at 2 o'clock. The whole committee was due to meet with Keith, and he would have had to explain how he would have continued being chairman considering the allegations being made. And it would have been a very difficult discussion, but he's done absolutely the right thing by standing down.
And do you think he should continue as an MP?
That is completely up to him and for his constituents to make that decision. The only thing the only thing that I am concerned about is making sure that the committee's work continues at a good pace and we have no other distractions.
For sex. Acting Chair Tim Loughton says Mr Vaz offered a very frank account of what happened and is now acting in the best interests of the committee.
With sadness, we all accepted that that was the appropriate course of action that he has taken, and we also appreciate the many challenges facing him personally and his family. Notwithstanding the nature of the press stories, all members of the Home Affairs Select Committee across all the parties paid very fulsome tributes to the work that Keith has done. He was genuinely sad about what has happened. He apologised to the committee for the trouble this has caused, and he obviously acknowledges that, and these are private matters now he will have to deal with. But absolutely what was paramount to him, characteristically, is the reputation and the work of the committee going forward.
Well, our senior political correspondent Robert Nisbet joins us now from Portcullis House in Westminster. So the committee say in private he's given a frank account of what actually happened, but what's been said publicly?
Well, there was quite a disconnect, really, Gillian, between the statements that we're hearing and Keith Vaz's appearance here, because he did come and speak to the committee a little earlier on, before that press conference that Tim Loughton was speaking, that we saw there. And Keith Vaz was smiling, walking around with a cup of tea in a saucer and talking to journalists, not saying a huge amount. I asked him whether he would come and speak to our cameras after the meeting of the Home Affairs Select Committee, and he put his arms around my shoulders and said, "Why would I come and speak to you when you say such nice things about me?" And then walked off. And while we were waiting, or the journalists were waiting for that news conference to be held, we were told by one of the officials that works here in Portcullis House that Mr Vaz had left the building and evaded most of us as we were waiting to speak to him as the meeting came to an end. But he has released a statement, and this is what it says: "It is in the best interest request of the Home Affairs Select Committee that its important work can be conducted without any distractions whatsoever. I am genuinely sorry that recent events make it impossible for this to happen if I remain chair. The integrity of the Select Committee system matters to me. Those who hold others to account must themselves be accountable. And I think you also got a sense of the sadness from the committee, because even though there are detractors of Mr Vaz who have seen him perhaps as being a bit of a showman at times, never too far away from a television news camera, always willing to share his views until now and this afternoon, I should add. But also there have been those on the committee who say that he has done tremendous work in his 9 years, the longest ever chairmanship of the Home Affairs Select Committee, pointing out that he has produced 100 independent reports, and when witnesses were called before the committee, he was always tenacious in his questioning of them, and many have expressed regret that that will be missed now that he has not only left the chairmanship but also left the committee. Now the process will begin of replacing him, and this is a very high-profile role in the House of Commons. Convention dictates that it will be a Labour MP, and so therefore the spotlight has fallen on Chuka Umunna, who also sits on the committee, of a high-profile Labour backbench MP himself, although having fallen out with the Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn, he could potentially be a successor. But the process will take some weeks because it will be a vote in the entire House of Commons, and it appears, as Tim Lawson was saying there, to be linked to a number of other changes in chairmanships of select committees around the House. So it will be a process that will probably happen after the party conference.
So we've heard what's happening within the Home Affairs Select Committee, possibly a new chair by October, I think Tim Lawson was saying previously. But what about the position within the Labour Party, his position there and as a member of the National Executive?
Well, we saw him yesterday, didn't we, on the back benches while all of this was swirling around and we were waiting to find out whether he was going to stay or whether he was going to go. But he asked a question about terror suspects fleeing Britain and potentially joining ISIS to the Home Secretary, Amber Rudd, yesterday afternoon. There was obviously a flurry of excitement when he took to his feet, but it's clear that he believes he still has a parliamentary career and a parliamentary job to do. So while he has stepped down as chair, he hasn't given any indication that he intends to step down as MP, although it does appear to be that there is pressure for him to do so, especially by the neighbouring MP, the Conservative Andrew Bridgen, who has been something of a thorn in the side of Mr Vaz for a few years now. He said he will continue his campaign to get him out of the House of Commons entirely. But as you have indicated, Gillian, he is also on that National Executive Committee, no great friend of Jeremy Corbyn, but it will be up to Jeremy Corbyn and the National Executive Committee and Mr Vaz himself as to whether he continues in that role. Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour leader, was asked about it a little bit earlier on today, and this is what he said.
There has to be confidence in a democratic process and therefore confidence in politicians, what they do. Keith has made that decision to resign. I think we should respect that decision, thank him for his work of chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee and move on from there.
But he remains a member of the National Executive for Labour. As party leader, should he remain there while these serious allegations are investigated? For example, you did suspend Ken Livingstone from that very committee when allegations were made against him. And do you think he should maintain the party whip?
The NEC will be discussing that next week when Keith attends the meeting. Keith will be there, as I understand it. He's an elected member of the NEC, and whatever decision is made on his future will be obviously partly made by him, but at the moment we're awaiting news on this.
So as I was pointing out a little bit earlier, Keith Vaz is very rarely out of the limelight. I expect now for a few hours, if not a few days, he probably will be as he considers his future. But for the time being, the 59-year-old Leicester East MP is remaining as the MP of that constituency.